Hello, everyone. This is going to be a weird interview. Can I see him? Is he live? Is he with us? He is with us. Hi there. So let's start off with every sort of Teams call in the world. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. I can hear you too. I don't know how much you see of what's going on right now, but we have this huge 360 stage, and we have like over 1,000 people sitting and looking at me basically, and your face on the screen. So, and also one weird thing is if I'm turned my back to some people, feel free to move over on this side. I apologize. We don't have a rotating screen, so while I'm doing this interview, I have to sit down so I can watch him. So, all right, sort of get to it. Thanks for being here, at least virtually. I just want to start off from the beginning with you to get this running. Is like your work. So Rails, Basecamp, Hey, like all that is great. And sort of what is next for you, and what's your newest project, what you're working on, and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah. So Hey is the latest product that I've been working on. Started working on that about 3 years ago. It's been driving a lot of the interest and changes that I've brought to the open source work that I do, both into Rails, the stuff we're doing on the front end with Hotwire. And I'm excited to finally share all the blocks of that. Usually I have this big burst of energy for open source after I do a new version of a product we've already done or a brand new product, because invariably we will have come up with a bunch of things that I feel like should be shared with the world. And that's exactly what we've done with Hey. We've released a bunch of that stuff already in the earlier versions of Rails, but now we're gearing up for Rails 7 and for a broad release of the final versions of Hotwire, which is the JavaScript set of frameworks that we've used to build Hey. That is Turbo, an evolution of Turbo Links, and Stimulus, the modest framework for the HTML you already have. So we've taken a very different path from almost the entire rest of the industry when it comes to how we approach JavaScript at Basecamp. JavaScript at Basecamp is written in large parts in service of not writing JavaScript. This is why we write the frameworks, is that we don't actually have to write the application JavaScript code for the standard cases. This is the entire pitch of Turbo, that there's so much of the dynamic aspects of modern web applications that we can abstract in such a way that we create those applications purely through HTML, and we get the dynamic benefits and features that we want without writing a bunch of JavaScript. Doesn't mean you don't have to write any JavaScript at all, but just that JavaScript can be smaller, less, and targeted. I've shared one metric where, hey, our new email client goes sort of head-to-head with Gmail. Gmail ships about 3 megabytes worth of JavaScript to render the inbox. And for the longest time, that was the canonical example of this is a kind of application you have to build with heavy single-page applications, because that's what an inbox is. We launch a competitor to that that's been incredibly well received by tens of thousands of paying customers, and it ships 60 kilobytes worth of JavaScript to render its inbox. So I've been on this, I think it's perhaps fair to say, crusade to illuminate the web industry to the fact that you don't need to write megabytes of JavaScript to build great, wonderful web applications. There are other ways to do things, and we finally have that complete answer on how to do those other things, how to do it a different way without just waving our hands and saying like we have some magic dust inside of our applications. And Hotwire is that. Combine it with import maps, ES6, ESM, and JavaScript CDNs, and you have a complete package that gives you access to the entire Node ecosystem of modules. It gives you all the dynamic elements that you need, and you don't even need to write a Redux, Mobix, Reducer, whatever the hell that is, and you'll probably be happier for it.
Cool. Especially when you're talking about that stuff, I was going to ask you something else, but you sort of pulled me to the next question. It's basically about frameworks, and so do you think it's super hard for frameworks that are not FANG-backed? So like the top tech companies in the world right now that are pushing more and more into developer space. You yourself and your team have been a company that has done that in the past. How do you think that looks like in the future? Because you seem very, very heavily invested in doing those things in the future as well.
Yeah, I am, and we are, for my own sanity. Because if I had to work with the prevalent technologies as they come out of FANG, I wouldn't do web development anymore. Because I would rather, I don't know, do gardening or be a librarian or something else far more exciting than dealing with those setups. Because I think, as the former speaker said, you're not fucking Facebook. Right? We're all not fucking Facebook. Facebook is Facebook, and they deal with problems at a scale that requires them to come up with some very specific solutions. And that is the problem when we try to adopt technology that's spun out of these mega corporations. They're invariably designed for the circumstances and the context of those mega corporations. I design frameworks and solutions that work well for individuals, for 4 people, for 10 people. I don't really care whether that necessarily works for a company that has, I don't know how many employees Facebook have, 300,000, 400,000. That's not the problem domain that interests me. And I think, in fact, oftentimes these things are in opposition. What a company of that size needs from its technology is diametrically opposed to what a single individual needs to be productive. So this is the great conceit, I'd say, of this modern wave of tooling that's coming from big companies, is that it doesn't work for you in so many ways and in so many instances. That doesn't mean there aren't good ideas coming from these companies. It just means that they're shaped inside the belly of a beast that is not your beast. And it's funny because this is the world I originally came from. When I created Ruby on Rails back in the early 2000s, it was a reaction to the big, heavy Java-based frameworks, J2E, Sun, IBM, all of these huge corporations, and come out with something that was designed to work well for a single developer or a small team. And it almost seems like we wound back the clock, that we've wound back the clock to 2000, and the complexities involved now with building modern web applications, if you follow quote unquote best practices, are just as oppressive as they were back then if you were doing J2E or any of the other approaches that also had been born inside the belly of huge beasts.
Yeah, on that note, I was just gonna say, this is my personal opinion. I don't know if it's yours. Is that like over the last 10 years, I feel that developing or web development in general has gone from faster to slower. It just feels like things take more time now than they used to, and they shouldn't, right? So, love to hear your take on that.
I think that's exactly right, and I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we've atomized web development. You're no longer a web developer. You're a front-end compiled specialist, whatever, right? Oh, I'm responsible for the front-end framework data store setup. That is my little carve-out here. And then someone else is responsible for the GraphQL API subsection under that path. Okay, fine. Again, this is a solution to a division of labor that perhaps works inside of huge corporations, but that division of labor is in direct opposition to the needs of that single developer who's trying to be productive on their own, following the quote-unquote best practices of the industry. And of course, they're going slower. But even worse than that, they're going slower, making things worse. Web applications in a variety of ways have gotten way worse over the past 10 years. Not uniformly so and not conclusively so, but in many instances, the complexities that we've wrapped ourselves into rendering what should have been essentially static websites into a fucking JavaScript application is just a travesty and waste of human potential. And no wonder there's a bunch of people who are dismayed that they can vaguely remember what the early 2000s, the 10s were like, or even the 2000s were like, and think like, actually, didn't it used to take us just a few days to add a new feature? Why is it taking 2 weeks now? Oh, it's because this, it's because that, right? And this doesn't have to be this way. There is real underlying progress that we could harness for greater productivity and that we should. Some of the advances that I've been most excited about recently is this triple threat of ES6 now being available in all browsers to the point that we no longer need Babel to transpile. The fact that we can use import maps such that we don't need bundlers at all. We've essentially cut out a huge part of the tool mess that we've been set up with by no longer needing transpiling, no longer needing bundling to develop great fast applications directly to user because of HTTP 2 and the fact that we don't pay a specific penalty, even if we should ship hundreds of modules as individual files to the browser. That's the kind of progress that is a long, slow slog, where one day you just wake up and go like, oh shit, we don't need all this complexity anymore, yet we get all the benefits. ES6 is a huge step forward from the kind of JavaScript that we used to write in the early to mid 2000s, right? But it isn't until now that innovation has been liberated from the accidental complexity it was wrapped in, because in order to use that advance, we had to come up with this incredibly complicated tool chain. I mean, I've done more than my fair share of Webpack configurations over the years. And every single time I come back after a few months away, I'm like, I don't even fucking know what's going on here. And I've built a bunch of this stuff, and that is a sure sign that like something is wrong when that level of complexity feels both arduous and arbitrary and foreign. When you come back to it 5 minutes after you wrote it, you know that something is effed. And I think that that's perhaps one of the frustrations I've had as creative Ruby on Rails, that in the mid 2000s, we had this idea of, you know what, we should solve the whole stack. This should be a full stack problem because we're delivering full stack solutions. No user cares about whatever the JavaScript end product is produced, and they care about the whole thing that they're using. And individual developers should be able to understand the whole thing that they're building. But that somehow fell out of favor, and we atomized the web development to the point that we needed all these specialists, we needed separate repos, we needed all these different things, and we didn't make it better for users, we didn't make it better for ourselves, and we sure shit didn't make it better for the industry. So I hope that we are standing on the precipice of a reversion here, that we go like, hey, do you know what? There's some real underlying progress here that we can harness, and that's good, and we didn't just waste our fucking time over the past 10 years, but we also did waste our fucking time over the past 10 years in a lot of ways, and we should stop doing that. That's my motive and motivation for being involved in this space. I mean, I'm sort of a reluctant JavaScript programmer, although less so these years than in past, because the underlying platform has gotten better. ES6 is actually a quite enjoyable programming language, if I may say so. It's just all the other stuff that's wrapped around it that I just can't stand, and have actively been searching for alternative answers to over all these years. And finally, we have a comprehensive alternative, and that's what Hotwire is.
Cool. So you're obviously, as you mentioned, not going to take up you're not going to give up doing this. You're not going to take up the exciting new job of becoming a librarian, but definitely continue on this path. Is there anything, sort of hints on what you're planning in the future, like any new projects or whatnot? If you're allowed to, if you're not, we can skip to the next question.
Sure. Well, I mean, I feel like we've only just gotten started with Hey. When we started developing Hey, I thought to myself, this is nuts. Wait, what? We're going to take on the dominant platform that sat squarely as a monopolist, essentially on the market for the past 15 years in form of Gmail, and we're going to take them head on with not just another fucking Gmail client. We're going to take them on as an alternative email service. That feels nuts, but hey, that went pretty well. So maybe we can now set our sight and ambition on other parts of that Google toolchain and help more companies essentially get out of Google world. I think that's a sort of ambition that most companies should have these ways. How can we distance ourselves from big tech? How can we get out of giving Google both our money and our attention and our privacy and enable their future abuses? Can we pick tooling from smaller companies who wish us well and who have simple business models like charging money for products and services in return for those products and services? I think that perhaps would help make the world a little better. So that's where we're going to continue on, expand the ambition of Hey, taking on an ever bigger slice of the opposition against platforms like Google, and then continue to do that fight as we release the tools and the weapons that we're using, as we're building them as we go along. Hotwire is a great example of that. Rails 7, which is due this year, is another great example of that. We need a broader rebellion. And the rebellion needs to be damn well armed to take on the evil empires of the world. And there are a lot of those. So continue forging the swords and the shields to take on this fight, enable people to do more with far less, not require opposition to these tools to mean I have to raise millions of dollars in VC because I have to hire 12 people just to put up a hello world page in React. But giving some productive tools that actually allow individuals and small teams on their own, without external funding, to take on this fight.
On that note, on the note of like your battle against Google, when you look at smaller SaaS companies, like you're bigger now with Basecamp, but I've been a SaaS founder for years, and other people here have as well. How do you fight essentially this duopoly of like Facebook and Google that when you try to market to users, you have to market through them and essentially give them more money, and in that sense make them bigger and stronger to fight against? So any tips on that? I've had my battles, but you've been more successful with them, definitely.
Well, we've entered or sat in this privileged position where we've essentially not needed to go through these gatekeepers, but I will agree that most people do. Most people do need to accept the fact that they live in an imperfect world for now and not let perfect be the enemy of good, right? That we can accept some compromises to how we'd like to live and work in order to exist. So that's one factor of it, but also that we don't have to do that quietly. One of the most rewarding battles I've had over the last few years is to take the fight against big tech to the one actor that can actually and definitively do something about that, which is the states of the world. There are sovereign states around the world finally waking up after a decade plus of slumber to the fact that we've let these companies run amok, and we've let them take over way too much of the economy, and we've ended up in a monopoly hell where they control the destiny of millions of companies and billions of people. And on second thought, oh shit, that was a bad idea. So now, hopefully, we can help push back in the other direction. We've just had a stunning victory in Korea, where Korea passed a law that basically none of us knew about until 5 minutes ago that bans Apple and Google from mandating the payment method in their app stores. So no longer can they demand 30% of the revenues from all businesses who wish to sell digital goods or services in Korea. That is a huge, monumental shift of power. And that shift of power can only come from sovereign states. No individual competitor is going to make Google or Apple do this. They can only be made to do this by a leviathan like the state of Korea. So I've been showing up for those fights, egging them on, writing about it, advocating for it, testifying, and I am just ever so pleased to see them bear fruit. So that's one avenue. The other avenue is simply to go hyper-capitalist on it, in the sense that deliver better shit, right? Gmail is stale. And of course it's stale, because it sat on a monopoly for 15 plus years. And you know what? There are users who are waking up to that idea, that they would actually like something better, that email, for example, to take just that one category, was not frozen in time in 2004 when Gmail was launched and then barely improved since. In fact, there are new ideas you can bring to market. And when you do bring new ideas to market, these huge companies are usually quite slow to respond. They may well respond one day and try to crush you, but before they spin up the 1,500 committees they need to pass a response through, you might very well be off to the races, as we found with Hey. I didn't think that Hey was going to work. I didn't think that we'd be able to sign up tens of thousands of people and convert them from using a free product, well, quote unquote free, right? It's not free in terms of your privacy or your attention, but still convert them to pay for a product. And there are endless amounts of examples of SaaS companies doing this in all sorts of markets, big and small. So the SaaS story is a incredibly sunshine story when it comes to competition and the ability for small developers to be able to offer something. Yeah, it's encumbered right now, especially if you're in a SaaS domain that requires native applications, such that you have to hand over perhaps 30% of your revenues if you go through these app stores, but that's changing too. So I am full of optimism right now. I don't think there's been a better time in the past 10 years to start a new SaaS company. These companies are on the back foot. They're going to be on the retreat pretty soon, and we're all going to be cheering when they do.
I hope that is true. We have a bit of time left, so I just wanted to touch on my favorite subject. I don't know if you heard, but right here, Porsche is our adrenaline sponsor, so people will actually get to experience the new 911 GT3, which I haven't yet, so I can't wait for that. We even closed up an airstrip for that later on. So too bad you're not here, although I'm sure you've had a chance to drive them up until now. Anyway, so I read somewhere the first thing you did, or one of the first things you did when you made your first amount of money was buy a yellow Lamborghini. True?
Very true.
Is it still there, or did you sell it?
I did sell it. I have other Lamborghinis, not in yellow, but I remain a big fan of cars, and actually particularly of this new era of cars. EVs are amazing. The Porsche Taycan is probably one of my favorite cars of all time. The new world and giving up the internal combustion engine is totally fine with me. Anyone who loves cars, who tries a proper electric car, and I'm not talking about a Tesla, I'm talking about something like a Porsche Taycan, will realize the benefits of electric power, the throttle response, the torque, the low center of gravity. These are amazing machines, and I could not be more excited to drive what's coming next here.
We have the Taycans here as well, and I do agree about the Tesla, but I won't go into that subject right now. So happy to hear that. You started personal racing. Just a question on that: why did you do that, and did you learn anything about yourself, or is it just like the adrenaline rush about it?
Yeah, I started racing because I found out that racing gave me a much more, pardon the pun, turnkey access to flow. One of my favorite things about programming is when you lose that sense of almost time and place. You're engrossed in a problem. It requires all your attention. Before you know it, you look up and 2 hours have passed and you go like, whoa, how did that happen? I found that in race car driving, at least for a long time, where I would get in a car, turn the key, and I'd go like, what? It's been 45 minutes? I just did 10 laps. It felt like I just got started. So it was a huge rush in that regard to just focus your mind, let all other distractions evaporate. And being that zone, I think just gave me such a great appreciation and such an easy access to it. It's much harder, I'd say, in programming. Sometimes more rewarding when it does happen, but ever so. And then also just a lot about learning. How do you learn a skill like race car driving when you didn't get your driver's license until you were 25, but you want to get on the grid of Le Mans? That's an interesting challenge. It's an interesting optimization of the tools and techniques you use in terms of picking up a new skill and getting proficient at it at a high level. I think any technologists can recognize this. We're constantly asked to learn new skills. And it's a real dividing road. I'd say the best programmers I know, they're excited to learn new things. And the people who stagnate are the ones who are annoyed to learn new things. So it's also very easy to flip from one to the other, that you used to be excited about learning new things, and then you get to a level of basic proficiency and you think you're supposed to be done. I'm done with learning now, right? And now you're annoyed when something new comes out or something that provokes the pillars of what you thought was true and going to be true forever. And you're like, sorry, dude, you're in the wrong fucking industry. You should be excited about learning. You should be excited about the new things that happen. Not uncritically so, but the pure sheer enjoyment of figuring out different ways we can do things should be there, which is why, for example, on the front end side, even though I've been such a skeptic of heavy JavaScript frameworks and whatever, I love learning about them. I love learning about React. I love learning about Redux. I love learning about Svelte. I love learning about all these new approaches to things or variations on things, because the learning itself is just interesting. Does that mean I want to do everything I learn and put it to use? Absolutely fucking not. You can still be discerning in that regard, but you should have that love of learning. And that's what I found in another context with race car driving, just the love of learning. That race car driving is an optimization problem, it's a learning problem, it's a skill. And you can actually pick it up. You can break it down. You can analyze why are some race car drivers better than others, why are certain cars working better than others. As an engineer in the tinkering sense, I think that should appeal to anyone.
Totally agree with you on that. And do you still, I mean, are cars still your thing, or things have changed in your life, or are you still learning on that, or how do you stand with that right now?
Well, things have changed in my life a bit. I live in Copenhagen now. I do actually have a Porsche Taycan in Copenhagen, and I use it about once every 3 weeks. because Copenhagen is a city that has embraced bikes in a wonderful way that I have really appreciated as now a father of 3, driving my kids to school every morning in an electric cargo bike. It's amazing. I like cars, but also, do you know what? Bikes are fucking cool. They're great. You're out in the environment, you're actually getting some exercise, and these new rush of electric bikes are amazing for many of the same reason that electric cars are so cool. They give you that extra fill-in torque, they are still engaging, you can go further, all these things. So I've been on a bike kick while I've been here in Copenhagen, and I actually wish that Copenhagen had far fewer cars. I love cars to bits, but I hate them as modes of transportation. Cars are there to be enjoyed as a skill, like a horse on a horse trap, not fucking riding around the city just shitting everywhere.
Well, we'll see. We'll see what the future of mobility takes us then in the future. So we're really about the end of time. So I have 2 more quick questions before you go. So really fast. So which one is your favorite car of all cars? So not just the series ones, whichever one.
Just one car, peak car, Pagani Zonda.
Okay, got that. And one more thing. So how did it affect you personally, your own self-image, your ego, and all that to be branded as one of the world's most influential developers?
Well, I didn't know I had been granted that. So
now you know. So how do you feel about that?
Well, that's nice. I mean, the thing about development and sharing things is I'm selfish. I do it for me. The sharing part is the secondary part. What I'm engaged in is making development better for myself such that I enjoy my daily life more. I also like sharing it after the fact, but it's priority number 2. So nice to have, but I'm more focused on just making sure that I want to keep doing this for perhaps another 10, 20, 30 years, or however long I can stomach sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, and however long we'll be able to live, we'll see how that evolves in the future. Great. Do you have anything sort of add? We have like 1 minute and 46 seconds left.
No, I just say if you are knee deep in the JavaScript front-end world, have a look at Hotwire. Hotwired.dev is a great place to start. You'll learn more about Turbo, learn more about Stimulus. All of that stuff is going to be default in Rails 7. So now is a good time to take a look at it if you've been trapped inside of React Redux bugs for the last 10 years.
All right. Thank you so much. We hope, thank you for your time. Sorry you couldn't make it. Hopefully we can get you here next year, whatever. And the trucks that are bringing our lunch sort of broke down. So luckily we're behind time and hopefully they've arrived now that we finished. So thank you so much and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Heinemeier Hansson.